Hey, everybody. Before we get started, I want to thank my friends at Hatch for producing this episode. You can get unlimited podcast editing and strategy for one flat rate by visiting hatch.fm. All right, let's get in the show. Welcome to Distribution First, the show where we flip content marketing on its head and focus on what happens after you hit publish. Each week, I share playbooks, motivations, stories, and strategies to help you repurpose and distribute your content because you deserve to get the most out of everything you create.
So Justin Simon, we could start off with a brief intro of who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So my name is Justin Simon. I run a consultancy agency, a coaching business around content distribution and repurposing, but also do full-on content strategy for companies as well. It's what I did for 12 years in-house at different software and SaaS companies. And so now my whole goal, I've lived the life of a content marketer for over a decade, and I've spent a lot of time creating a lot of content. And so now my goal is trying to help people get the most out of that content. And actually, if you're going to spend the time, energy, effort, money to create content, make sure it's going to work for you. Make sure you're going to be able to get it out. Make sure it's going to last long after you hit publish. That's my goal.
Yeah, 100%. Diving right into it, what have you seen, I would say, like with some of the clients, what industries are your clients in?
I mean, my typical client is like a SaaS client, so like a software company, but I've worked with everybody from an individual coach to accountants to, I've worked with a smattering of folks. Obviously I'm running my own business too, so I do this for my own company as well. It's not like you have to have a giant team and a whole enterprise to be able to do this. You can do it on your own too.
Yeah. I was going to say, what have you found some repetitive issues that come along with your clients that maybe some of the biggest challenges that you've seen people deal with when it comes to content distribution?
Yeah, the biggest problem with content distribution, honestly, is not having content worth distributing. It feels backwards, but as soon as I just got off a call with a client today, as soon as you start trying to distribute something, you realize very quickly whether or not it's worth distributing to your audience. And so I think step one is creating something valuable enough that it's worth distributing and then distributing over time. So creating something that's more evergreen, creating something you can go back to, creating something with your point of view in it. Like there's a whole series of things, especially when you're talking about typically with content distribution, folks are thinking around top of funnel, awareness generation, driving, creating demand around a topic or idea, those type of things. There are bottom of funnel distribution as well. Typically that's more SEO. People are already searching for something. You're just showing up for that. So
yeah. How would you advise either an individual or a company to find what's actually valuable to their consumer?
You can ask. That's number one. So, it's basic, but people don't ask because I think they're scared they're going to get rejected or they're not going to get an answer that they want. Or, it's intimidating to maybe even ask people like, hey, what would you want to see? What are you curious about learning? What's missing in your... And I know for me, the closer you are to it, like in your world, the closer you are to real estate, the harder it's going to be to see those things, to see the basics that people don't understand because you know them like the back of your hand, right? Like you just know them. And so I think sometimes you'll be surprised if you ask people. One of the things I do, and I stole this from somebody else, so anybody listening can steal it from me, is if you sign up for my newsletter, I ask you to, hey, if you want, respond. What's your biggest problem? What are you working on? What are your challenges? And I'll respond to you with an answer. And I do. But it's a way to also gather feedback in terms of like, what are people struggling with? What are the problems that they're having? And you can really it's a low key way to kind of understand what people are looking for.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question was like, I sometimes like ask stupid questions just to not assume anything. But I was going to ask, like, how do you even ask them? Is it like, so you mentioned via your newsletter before so as I'm assuming they opt in because they found something of yours valuable on social. And then that first email out or second is like, hey, what do you want to see? What do you want coming from me? But is there other methods? Like, would you advise just literally like calling a past client or what are some other methods to ask?
I've talked to previous coaching clients. I've talked to previous clients, even in sort of as I'm doing consultative work, I'll ask questions that are sort of like spurring, in my brain, like content ideas. I think everything is a content idea. Everything's content basically. Once you're able to see it that way, you can't kind of unsee it. And so I think for me, but yeah, you can be straight up. I've straight up asked, hey, do you hop on a call? I got to pick your brain on a few things about what type of content that would be helpful. What are you missing? What do you wish was out there that you don't have? If you could wave your magic wand and learn one thing, what would it be? These type of questions where it's like, you as the advisor, you want to view yourself not, and again, as your case, whether it's an agent or whoever, you're not an agent, you're a guide. You're helping these people make a better decision and get better at whatever they're trying to do. Make a better financial decision to buy a house, make a better investment decision, make a better content decision, whatever it is, you want to be able to help them do that. And so if you come to it with that mindset of like, my goal is just to help you, you're going to get smarter. They're going to get smarter. And hopefully if you end up following up on that, they're going to be like, man, he or she actually listened to what I had to say and implemented.
Yeah, 100%. I learned from one of my last guests that I had on. This dude is brilliant, Justin. Like I've never I don't think I've ever came into a contact with a pure genius. And when I say genius, I mean just the way that they think is just completely different. I want to say, conceptualized all of their thoughts and worked out all of their, I want to say hypothesis to see what works and what doesn't. And then has published multiple books and things of that nature. He has some ridiculous clients, like some companies that we interact with on a daily basis. Those are his clients that he consults for. And so, but basically he told me about the buyer's journey and how important that is, and basically staying connected with it. And basically you engineer from that journey, whatever journey that they went on, you interview them, ask them about this journey. And then that's where you extract all that insight that you're talking about to then know how to give to them what they're asking for based on all the hurdles that they ran into within that journey of purchasing whatever they purchased. And so, yeah, that's interesting. Have you found either you've done it or, well, actually you have done it. I was going to say, have you found ways to automate that process of asking clients about their buying journeys or about what they find valuable from your company?
I mean, the email is the easy one from an sort of more automatic standpoint. I think having it sort of just top of mind, and it's not something you have to do. You can do it consistently in a way like where you're pulling emails or I mean, social media, you can post to your your email, hey, what are the things that you're most interested in? I'm building a membership right now. And so I put out wait list with a full-on form where people can fill out what type of content they want. What are they interested in? What are the things they're most wanting to learn or get out of that type of thing? And that's the type of insights that I couldn't get by just guessing. I have assumptions, but now I know, people who fill this out, these are the top 3 things they want. These are the top 3 things they want to learn. Cool. That's where I have to put my focus and then see where it goes from there and obviously adjust. But it gives me those guide points. So I think don't overthink it. It doesn't have to be whatever complicated. It could literally be a Zoom call where you're asking, again, a couple friendly people that you did business with or that are in the same industry, just ask them questions. And then that gives you at least a real life, guidance in terms of where you want to go.
Yeah, 100%. And Justin, just to let you know, I sometimes do that. So sorry if questions get so deep into oh, well, what about this? Well, you got to think about that too much. It's just ask, And so, yeah, my brain sometimes does that. Kind of switching gears a little bit. What's your goal with putting out content? Is it engagement or what's that overall goal? With putting out content for you?
I think it depends on the type of content. So if you're thinking LinkedIn or social content, that probably has a different purpose than newsletter content, which has a slightly different purpose than podcast content, which has a massively different purpose than a sales email content. So it depends on what you are creating. Everything you create, you talk about the buyer's journey, there's a whole slew of content you can put out across that journey. The key is to understand the difference between what's your purpose for that piece of content and being very, very clear in that. The problem occurs when people blend those things and you try to make one piece of content do too many things. I want to be helpful, but I also want to sell my course. And I want to do this. And I want to do that. And you're not serving anybody in that instance. And so I think understanding the purpose, even LinkedIn, for instance, It depends on the type of post. I might do a testimonial post for my course where I want people to know I have a course, want to take it, go buy it in that one post. But that might be 1 out of 20 posts. Whereas the rest of my posts, maybe it's value add around a particular idea. I'd say overarching, if you're looking like how I want to think about content is I want you to have no doubt where I stand on the things that I care about and want you to know. And I want you to be able to be educated on those things, to be educated on the problem, to be educated that there's a solution, to be educated that there's a way to do it differently, to be motivated to change, and then potentially to be motivated to work with me to change those things. I mean, ultimately, right? But like my goal with the content, if you just take it at the most macro broad level, it's like to educate, inspire, motivate, and then get those people to want to make a change in their life. And then eventually, hey, by the way, I can help you do that if you want. But it's not this over like arching over, heavy handed approach.
Yeah. Do you sometimes hear from maybe people that you're talking to on social media or your actual clients? What is some goals that they're trying to accomplish that you're like, wait a second, I don't think you're thinking about content marketing correctly?
Direct revenue and sales with every piece of content.
Yeah.
How do I get sales now? I mean, I need more pipeline today. I need more revenue today. It's not enough. How do I do it now? That's it. And it's like, well, that's not how it works. And they want they want a shortcut for building trust, and you can't do that. That's what content's, at the end of the day, you want awareness, and you want to drive awareness so you can become known, liked, and trusted by a group of people. Right. Once you become known, liked, and trusted, then you can be willing to make the sale, if you will, or they might be more willing. That's how people buy today. People are not, I can go ask my friend about something if I want to buy it. I can go research it all. I don't have to hop on a sales call. You don't have to sell me anything. I'll do 95% of the work before we even get on a call.
Yeah. I feel like that's the biggest reason why because I see that too. I mean, I was just on a call with a guy the other day and he was like, yeah, so I'm trying to bring in X amount of more revenue and I wanted to start posting content to then start bringing in X amount of whatever it is. And then I was like, wait a second, I don't think you're like thinking about it correctly, like thinking about content marketing correctly. And so I feel like they think about it like I pay and then get something out of it. And they
paid ads.
Yeah. That's exactly what paid ads. And so paid ads may be a part of it to drive revenue for the company. And that's more of a holistic marketing strategy. But when it comes to posting content, there's a different goal that then domino effects into revenue later on down the line. And so, yeah.
The content you create today is going to impact you 6 months and 12 months down the line.
100%. Perfect.
And then that scales.
Yeah. 100%. Can you go over, I found your 3C's methodology on your website. Could you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. So the 3C methodology, it's basically how I think about structuring the content that you have to create. It's not a content strategy. There's a lot that goes into a content strategy, but 3C content method is what I call cornerstone, core, and cut content. And the idea behind it is being a lot of people create a lot of content, but it's not tied together. And then none of it's connected. And then it becomes kind of random bits of content and random bits of marketing rather than sort of a cohesive message and plan. The idea being you want something core. So at the center of, if you kind of view this as an inverse pyramid, at the core that you're going to run all the time. For you, it's probably this podcast. For some companies, that's a blog. For some people, that's a newsletter. Pick one. Pick something where you can be consistent and generate content off of that. So if you're creating, the idea being you want to create something that you can get other things off of. So for me, I have a podcast, and off of that, I can create a newsletter every week. And off of that, I can create social content for the entire thing. So the social content, emails, et cetera, being the cut content coming off of it. Cornerstone is something big and meaty. And for SaaS clients, you could envision something that's like an original research report or an event. I'm going to do a virtual event and we're going to host all these people and bring all these people and spend tens and tens of thousands of dollars to do this. Well, you want to make sure you're getting something out of that. So all of this information that's being shared and being dispelled can be turned into core content. You can take it, maybe release it on a podcast. You can take it and turn it into a blog post and then go down and turn that into social content. But the idea being reverse engineering what you need. So cut content being at the bottom, you want to be in front of your audience every single day. I truly believe that. are competing with every other thing imaginable on the internet. You're
Mhm.
not just competing with other realtors. You're not just competing with other SaaS companies. You're competing with every single thing.
Mhm.
And so you want to be in front of your audience. They're not going to look for you. They do not wake up in the morning, eat their breakfast, and think, "Oh, I got to go see what so-and-so's talking about." What they're doing is they're they're turning on their phone.
Yeah.
You can see where they're turning on their phone, scrolling any given feed, and then just like, what's interesting today?
Mhm.
You want to make sure you're interesting today.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's the goal. So that at a high level is the 3C content method. The idea being you can create one thing every single week and then use that to generate that daily attention and daily awareness around your thing versus creating a bunch of little things and things that are not cohesive. Saves you a
Yeah.
bunch of time.
Yeah. How do you select platforms? And then how do you, I would say, develop a pretty good audience on that platform?
Platform depends on kind of where you view your audience being at. I think two things, especially if you talk about sort of at an individual level. For coaching clients, I say when we're selecting channels, it's like, where's your audience? But then also, what do you enjoy? Because if you
Mm.
don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it. And unfortunately, for some people, you got to learn to enjoy it because they're going to say, I don't enjoy any of them. And it's like, well, you got to pick something. You can't not do anything, or you can hire somebody who enjoys it.
Mhm.
and can do that for you. So, I mean, that's an option. But as far as channel goes, it's like, where's your audience? Is your audience, who are they? Are they mainly in Facebook groups? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they really big on YouTube or TikTok? Or like, where are they?
Mhm.
It could be a bunch of them. But I always say, like, have your top 3. And then from there, go all in on one,
Mhm.
play with 2 as you have time. And then you're never going to get to 3 until you start expanding. So don't worry about it.
Mhm.
Because otherwise, you're just starting for a lot of these folks. When I ask for like what channels, like to expect you to be on YouTube and LinkedIn and this and that, like to be ever, like you're not going to do it because it's just a piece of the job. You're still doing all these other things.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And that's exactly what I was asking, because I could imagine for a lot of the either real estate agents or in our industry, they're like team leaders and broker owners. These are kind of like the individuals who are looking over the real estate agents and making sure everyone's producing the way that they need to be producing. And so for them, when it comes to posting the content, that's just one thing that I hear often is like, wait, how do I know which one to do? Like, do I do like go all in like Gary Vee talks about, where it's like you need to be posting 15 times a day on each platform? Or do it's like, hey, do you know I have more of like a sniper focus on let's get this platform down, and then kind of like a overflow in effect when it comes to like buckets to where it's like, all right, now that we have this one down, now let's move over to Instagram or Facebook or whatever platform it is.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. The key, because you asked like, how do you grow? Consistency. Your audience has to know that you're going to show up with a particular type of content over time.
Mm.
You have to be consistent. Anybody can send one email and I can sign up. But are you going to send an email every single week with value that when I get in my inbox, I'm like, yeah, that email's in my inbox. Awesome. I'm excited to see this.
Mm-hmm.
Is it when I see you on my feed, I'm just quickly scrolling because I don't see you that often. I'm not sure what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it like, oh, great, so-and-so's on in my feed. I got to check this out. This is valuable. So being consistent with it is huge. And then be narrowed down. Again, like if you can't be consistent on one, you will never be consistent on 15. You're not Gary Vee.
Yeah.
Nobody is.
Yeah. And I think Gary Vee worked his way up to that, because I think YouTube was the first platform that he was really going in on. And it's like he says that now, and
he also has an entire team that does it for him. So
exactly, yeah. Yeah. Can we get into? But
I don't know. Can we?
Can you talk a little bit about the repurposing? What is your thought process regarding like repurposing? Is there a strategy to it? Is there a good way to do it? Is there a bad way to do it? What goes through your mind when you hear repurposing content?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a strategy behind it. If anybody's interested, they can join my newsletter. If you're really interested and you want to do it, you can buy my course, Content Repurposing Roadmap. It's lays it all out there for you. But from my perspective, there's 2 different ways to think about repurposing. There's micro repurposing, which is what most people think about, which is how do I take this podcast and cut it up into a bunch of clips? How do I take this blog and cut it up into a bunch of social content? That's micro repurposing. There's also macro repurposing, which some people consider like remixing or doing this, which in my brain is how do I take an idea and remix that into a bunch of different ideas or different types of content or different formats or different angles. So for me, a huge overarching theme is this theme of distribution first. That's my podcast. This idea of like, you need to think about distribution before you even create that piece of content. Well, there's a slew of stuff I can create around that. It's not just a single blog post or a single idea or a single podcast episode. There's tons of things that come off of that. And so
Right.
how I think about it are those two ways. I think about it at a macro level of like, over the next year, I want people to think about me and this thing. What do I need to do to make sure that happens? And then at a micro level, okay, once I have this content, I need to make sure that that's getting out in front of the audience. And how do I do that?
Yeah, interesting. Are you utilizing the micro pieces of content to drive traffic to the macro pieces, like the long form content? So like with this podcast that I'm about to do, so LinkedIn is my channel. Are you utilizing the little bits and pieces that I'm going to cut up from this to drive traffic to the whole podcast? Or is there some sort of other like CTA or is there a CTA? Is it just pushing content?
There's actually not. I've actually evolved it to where I'm not even pushing a CTA anymore. A, because LinkedIn doesn't want you to do that. They're going to devalue your content if you put a link in. They bury the comment, bury your link, even if you comment a link. And so I think for me, I've really shifted my mindset in particular, the last 3 months around how do I just be valuable in that feed? And then people will find out, right? People are going to find out I have a podcast and listen to it or not. And I can do that in subtle ways. Hey, this clip came from Distribution First. Go check it out. I don't have to say, here's a link and da-da-da. Like, I just want to add value into the feed and where they're at. And so that's kind of my goal, is to be able to pull out the value and then just give it to people for free, knowing that most people don't want to sit down or don't have the time to listen to every 30 to 40 minute podcast episode. But I've got there's so much good stuff I did on that episode. If I don't distribute it, if I don't just give that value in the feed, nobody's going to even know it exists.
Yeah, that's true. Damn, that's true. Is there a way that do you do any sort of paid ads on social platforms?
Nope.
It's all organic.
Yep.
Interesting. Have you tested anything with paid ads?
Nope.
Nothing? Holy cow. Oh man. Yeah, that's interesting. Are you like against it, or you're just like, hey, this just isn't a part of my...
I'm totally not against it. And I have a lot of respect for people who do that. And I have friends who do that for a living that help people do paid ads. But I think for me, it's been, especially running my own business, I haven't needed to. I'm sure I could and probably will at some point, but like where my focus needs to be at any given point, I'm like, I've got enough kind of coming through and pipeline and building an audience, all this stuff organically. So it's like, I don't need to really like put in dollars and try to boost the engine on that. So I'm not against it, but I just haven't needed to dive into it.
That's interesting. Yeah. So do you have the thought process of going deeper with your audience rather than wider? Like,
right now for sure. Yeah. Because the idea being, right, like, and you can do this. I'm sure the folks who are listening to the show can do this too. Like, you should have an idea of what your ideal client or what do you need? What do you need at any given point or in any given year? And then you can kind of reverse engineer what the heck you have to do to make that happen. Yeah. And so for me, running a solo business, there's only a handful of things that I really need to be able to do to be successful for me. And success is going to mean different things to different people. So for where I'm at right now in my business, it's like, let's go super deep. The people who come in and have those conversations, my dream scenario, right, is they come in and they're already bought in and they know kind of everything there is to do about the mentality shift. They're ready to do it. And hey, let's go do this. Let's go build the system and rock with it. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm sure at some point it will make sense to widen out and try to hit a wider audience. But right now, haven't needed to.
Yeah. Dang, that's super dope, dude. I was expecting you to say like, oh yeah, I'm using, paid ad, push the message more to get more followers and stuff like that. But dude, kudos to you for developing, because I think you have like 10, 12, 15,000 followers.
Yeah.
Is that your main channel, LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And to do that all organically, holy moly. Yeah, that's nuts. Talk to me about your operations. Is it just you on
Yep.
Oh, it's just you. Wow.
Just me.
Yeah. So how do you efficiently pump out this content? Like, I have to first edit this long form piece of content, and then I have to swift through to see like the pieces of content that I'm like, okay, which ones am I going to post on my LinkedIn? How do you efficiently get through that whole process?
So for me, I'm lucky I have a partner who does the clipping for me that I work with a company to be able to do that. Comet Media does that for me and they do a really, really good job. But even if I had to do that on my own, I think that's really where the 3C method comes in, and being able to say like, what's my goal in reverse engineering, like distribution, for instance, right? Like if you want to post every single day on LinkedIn, like 5 days a week, like Monday through Friday on LinkedIn, I got to be consistent.
Yeah.
It's only 20 posts a month. So if you're doing a podcast every single week, you could fill your entire content pipeline with 5 clips. So you don't even, out of each episode, you don't even have to go that deep. And that's just top of funnel podcast content. That's not even like, hey, I'm mixing some sales stuff here and there. So I think understanding how much content you need to get out helps you understand how much content you need to put in. And like I was talking to somebody the other day, like I really don't even need to do a weekly show for my content strategy to run. And I could get by with a monthly show, distribute the content. I have enough backlog now. Like I'm sure the more interviews you do, the more backlog you're going to have. Like there's content that I can pull from last February, from last March, and it would resonate just as well today. In fact, I do that. If you go back, and if anybody wants to like look at my distribution first feed, like I don't think I published anything new in December. I literally went back and reposted best of content for December. And it was all the top episodes that were throughout the year. And I have to look, but I think it was the second best month that I had on the show.
Wow.
Literally, like I'm just reposting. This is the best hit. I'm being absolutely explicit with it. So I think being comfortable with understanding how much you have and what you need to do and where those channels are. So again, for me, if every single week I'm showing up on LinkedIn, I'm sending an email newsletter, and I'm releasing a podcast episode, I'm winning. I don't need to do any more than that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's interesting because one thing that I've noticed too is that sometimes I go back and re-listen to the podcast that I did, and I find something else that's in there that I didn't see before. And I'm like, wait a second, my audience would benefit from this clip. And I just didn't see it before for some reason. And so maybe I like learned something new now that my audience wants to see, and I actually captured it and I didn't know at that time. And so that podcast that I did 2 months ago, I'm like, oh, wait a second, this is in there.
And I think that's the thing is like, especially when it's your thing, I'm guessing for you and for other listeners, like you have the freedom and flexibility. Like there are no rules. There are no rules, right? What I've done in those scenarios is I pull that meaty thing out that I'm like, that's really, really good. And I've just released that as a standalone podcast episode. This is a quick hit. It's a short up 5 minutes. You're going to get some really good information. Or I'm also at the same time going to take that video clip of that and I'm going to put it on LinkedIn and I'm going to share it. Or I'm going to take that transcript and I'm just going to chop it up and provide some value and email the list. But now I've got that. It's top of mind. I just need to cut it up in the right areas.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because with the operations, I was going to go into like, so with my content, I do all of the, obviously, creating, piecing up, all the editing, all the posting, all that good stuff for right now. But at first I was like, all right, cool. Like I'm just going to, once I get to that point, just delegate the editing piece, because that's a piece that I hate. And so I'm going to delegate the editing piece off to somebody. But then I was questioning myself. I was like, wait, how would you systematize it to a point to where they knew what pieces to pick for my audience? And so you said, who do you use for the clipping up of pieces?
I use Comet Media. They have different packages, but it's basically unlimited editing for podcasts and stuff like that. But I think that takes some work with whoever you end up working with. And I've worked with a lot of different agencies over the years who do different, when I was in-house, I was working in agencies to do the cuts. It does take time. Sometimes it's not what you would want, or sometimes it's not a valuable clip. And that I think happens, but that's on you to then, where do you want to spend your time? Do you want to spend your time on that 30-second reply to say, hey, this one isn't good enough because of X, Y, and Z reason? Or do you want to spend the 2.5, 3 hours pulling clips, editing them, putting the transcripts on, all that stuff?
Yeah, because I was like, I know I'm going to delegate it to someone or like a company of some kind, like marketing agency of some kind. But that was the disconnect where I was like, wait a second, how did they know what clips to pull that's best for my audience? I would literally have to educate them on my audience and be like, hey, look, these are the topics that they most like to see. And so like anytime, and again, I'm like thinking through it as of right now, but yeah.
And you can, like, I would think from an operations, but like what I used to do when I was in-house and I would ship that stuff off is I would still go through the episode and I would say, this is the main point. This is the main point. This is the main point. They just need to go edit it now. Here's the timestamp. Here's the timestamp. Here's the quote. Here's the quote.
Yeah.
So you can do it that way too, where it's like, you don't have to do the editing, but if you want a little bit more hands-on control, you can lay out exactly what you want clipped and say, nothing more, nothing less. Here's what I want.
Yeah. That's why I didn't, which was the next question that I was going to ask you. That's why I've tried Opus and a couple of those like AI clipping pieces up, upload the content, it takes everything out of it. But it was always clips. And I was like, this isn't for my audience. And it's because like the whatever algorithm that they have that teaches the AI to pull the clips, it's pulling it based off of, I would have to go back and look at how Opus does it, but it's pulling it based off of what the AI thinks would get the most engagement based off past clips. And so I'm like, yeah, in my mind, I'm like, okay, it doesn't work. And so basically my next question was going to be your thoughts on AI and incorporating it in the operations of content distribution.
I think AI has been super helpful. Honestly, it's how I've been able to do a lot of the things I'm doing on my own. So like whether it's an AI tool for podcasting, I think even outside of like clips, it's a tool like whisper.ai or a tool like Cast Magic. Like there's a whole bunch of these different tools where you can input it and get outputs out, right? And that's saving time from like captions, transcripts, podcast descriptions, all the nitty gritty stuff that used to take a ton of time to be able to create, like can exponentially make that faster. I will say though, from the clip standpoint, I've tried a bunch of them too, and I've never been impressed. I've never been impressed with what they find, and I've never been like, that's a really good clip that I would want to share with my audience. So a tool I do like to use because I do still cut some of my own clips depending on what it is. If it's not a podcast, if it's a webinar or training or stuff like that, I like Descript. I like using Descript for that because I can go through and I actually built a template. You can build a template in Descript, and like once you figure it out, for anybody who's intimidated by video editing, you can edit it like a document. It takes a transcript for you, and then you can just highlight what you like and then just say create clip basically, and it'll create a clip for you. And it'll take that transcript and put it all in there. So you can find your own clips. It's basically like reading through a Word doc. And you can be like, oh yeah, that's a really good spot to be able to find that. Or like as you're doing the show, if you know like, all right, 32 minutes in, like I can just make a quick note like 32 and I can go back and I can quickly remember what was interesting about that particular point. I do think there is something valuable. I mean, I'll say this, like I do think there is something valuable, especially if you're doing like a core piece of content, to get in there and remember the things that are in it. Because those are the types of things that you end up creating a newsletter about, wanting to write on social, wanting to dive more into. That come out of that.
100%. So for the, what's it like real estate companies that are so focused on either, so for like the top producing real estate agents that are so focused on providing great services to their clients, and they're like, hey, I'm driving revenue for my company, for me as a real estate agent, I delegate everything else. Or for like the brokerages, they're like, we want to start doing this, but obviously we're so focused on making sure our agents are producing, we're just going to delegate it out. What would you advise looking for in, I would say like marketing agencies? Because I believe it wouldn't be just like one editing, I would say like company. It would be like somebody who comes in and starts creating content for them. What would you advise like looking for in marketing agencies to hire?
Do your research. I mean, I've worked with, like I said, I worked with a bunch of marketing agencies. Agencies can be great, but they also can be awful. I've seen people and companies drop 30 grand on an agency to tell them nothing new, or just give them what they think they want, not what they actually need. I think in that case, for those folks, like you're looking for a strategic partner. You're looking for somebody who can strategically help you build a plan that isn't just tactics, and then also provide you the help on the tactical side to be able to execute the strategy that they're building, because you're essentially outsourcing a marketing department at that point. So these are people like, how do you understand audiences? How are you going to understand our audience? We have a very unique scenario in this case. How do you message to them? What is your like asking questions around? I would focus way more on strategy at the front end than like, hey, we're going to come in and help you spread your message. Because again, going full circle back to the beginning, if your content's not good, what message are you spreading? If your message isn't validated with the market, who cares if you're spreading it? Because it's not validating. You're just spreading a message that nobody cares about.
Yeah. I was talking to a real estate agent. She was actually a pretty good producer within her company in her area. And she said that, so she does a lot of posting and, hey, this is what's in my neighborhood and all the stuff that buyers care about when moving. And she hired somebody to delegate it out because she was getting busy. And she said her following actually went down and her engagement went down in the time span that they hired this company. And I was like, man, like It's tough. I think it's very difficult to find an individual. And I think it would be a team. Like if I had the resources just to be like, all right, cool, I'm delegating this whole piece out, it would be strategy all the way down to tactics. And they would need to know how to do that. And I would feel more comfortable if they knew how to do that in my industry, or prove to me that they have a process in finding the right, questions to ask me as a company when it comes to my goals with this content, and the consumers, like know right questions to ask consumers to extract that information that you're going to put into your content. And then it's like, going over that. All right, cool. What type of content for who on which platforms? And then let's get started. And so like I think that's like a whole project. You can't just be like, oh, hey, videographer, go start creating content.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I honestly don't think it works like that, this type of content.
Yeah, it's a misconception that like certainly on social content has evolved to where it's not just throwaway content. It actually does matter. And like you said to that point, like I'm sure the content was probably just changed enough, or the frequency or whatever, something changed enough for people to be like, ooh, this is not, it's not the same. And I don't know what that is for her in particular, but
Right.
at the end of the day, it does always come back to the audience being number one. You have to be able to create content that they care about.
Yeah. Let me know, Justin, if I'm thinking about this correctly. The way I think about content on platforms is the way I think about Netflix and HBO Max and like all those different. And matter of fact, it's not even those. I would say it's like the platforms and the posting content. It's kind of like channels. You remember MTV, BET, ESPN? It's like that. Could you imagine ESPN starting to post like something like music videos? They would start losing the engagement in that viewership that they get on their channel, because the sports enthusiasts are like, what is this? I'm not here to look at music videos. I'm here to look at obviously sports stuff. And so like, why are you guys posting music videos? And so like, that's how I think about content when it comes to platforms and when it comes to brands and stuff like that. There's some sort of, I want to say like personality, or there's some sort of, the topics have to do with it as well, to where the audience is like, I'm here for this. And when this isn't there, then I start to lose engagement with this company. And so, yeah, so I think of like companies as those channels, like ESPN and BET, MTV, and things of those.
Well,
channels.
I think now you can think about it even more narrowed, because the way the world is, you can be so niched down to where what you have to understand is like, you are not for everybody. There's only a certain subset of people that like my style, like my content, like what I talk about, and are going to want to interact with me. And that's okay. I'm not trying to get every single marketer on the planet to hang out. I'm trying to get people who want to focus on distribution, be more efficient, spend less time creating, more time on being strategic, like those type of things. And there's only a certain subset of the market who cares about that. And then there's only a certain subset of the market who cares about me. And that's okay. And so I think there's going to be lots of voices out there for the folks that you're talking about here. And it's the same for me. Like there are lots of people who talk about content marketing, but there's only one me, and there's only one way that I think about it and talk about it. But I've also owned that. And so I think for your audience, like think about those things as you're thinking about content too, and creating, and like, why are they coming to you? What's your point of view? What's your state, right? And for that person, right, it's like, well, because they're being helpful and they're showing about this particular neighborhood in this particular spot, right? I'm only going to go to that person for that. I'm not going to go to them about generalized realtor advice or whatever, or generalized buying markets and those type of things. I want specific information about this thing.
Yeah.
And so that's how the world has changed, is where ESPN and those type of things, like generalized sports content, but then there are individual shows on that platform that you like and you don't like, and there are individual characters on there that you like and you don't like, and there's reasons why. And so I think being able to understand like you fit in that spot, it'll open you up to be able to create better content.
Yeah, 100%. What was going on? So like keeping that lens on of the channels, what I was thinking about was like, because you said you can go deep into like actual specific piece of content that have to do with this overall niche. And so like if the niche was sports, then you have your football enthusiasts. And then it's interesting because then you have to be honest, I don't know the name of the show. It's called the show, like the wives of the NBA players. Or
whatever. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, something like that. And it's like, it has to do with sports, but it's with this specific niche of the sports and for this specific audience. And so, yeah, it's like, what are the wives doing of NBA players? And so it's like, it's so specific. But again, it's
Well,
a,
I mean, you could take any given team. You take any given team, there's specific people that talk about that team, but then there's specific shows that talk about that team where it's like, I might only listen to one of them or I might listen to two, but not all 20 that are out there.
Yep.
And so like being able to understand where you fit, that's a huge part of it.
100%. So I have 2 questions. Oh, actually, I have like 3 questions left. Try to fit them in 10 minutes. How do I, and I apologize if this question is redundant because you may have answered it. How do I know that my content is working? Is there any sort of KPI that you keep track of, or is there any indicator where you're like, oh, this is working?
I think it depends. So like we did touch on kind of goals, like what's your goal for it? There's certain content where the goal is clicks and revenue. So if people are not clicking and signaling that they're interested in buying, that content did not work because that was its goal. But I'd say more at the macro, I think it's conversations. It's more qualitative than quantitative. Like getting a response that this podcast was super helpful, or getting a text message from a past client that, dude, loving the show. Those type of things matter in my mind way more than 25 engagements on LinkedIn or 100 engagements on LinkedIn. Like having the comments, the DMs, for me, it's been really rewarding over the last year of doing distribution first. Like I see people that don't tag me, don't comment, talking about distribution first, like the process. So it's like, okay, that's working. Screenshot that and just save that over here in this little file for patting myself on the back. Back in the day, it was screenshotting that and sending it on a slide deck to be able to show somebody. But yeah, I think, how do I know the content's working? It's more of a macro over time. Like, do I feel like this is being helpful? Am I getting good responses? Is there growth in an area, right? Is the newsletter growing? Is the podcast growing? Is LinkedIn growing, or is everything flat? If things are flat, okay, I got to adjust and figure out why is that? What am I doing? What's not working? And then again, going full circle, ask the audience, ask a couple folks. There's probably people that even if you got 3 people that are previous clients who might interact with your content, or like, hey, can I ask you a few questions about this? Get real feedback. It's okay.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I like that. Let's see. Last question that I had was, or last 2 questions that I had was, and let me know if this is out of your realm, but like, can you walk me through for a company that is trying to drive more clients from posting content on social? They're trying to attract more clients to the business, obviously, to do business with. How do you make that transition? How do you turn engagement and conversations on social into actual, like, people now like raising their hand and being like, hey, let me talk to sales, or let me talk to whoever it is about whatever that you have? Like in your world, it's probably a SaaS product. And so like, how do you transition them over to sales now?
Yeah, it's using different channels, or even using the same channel like LinkedIn, but doing different things with it. So you can do a standalone sales post. You can talk about the problem, agitate it, talk about the solution, and then give your offering as a solution and say, hey, reach out to me if you want to solve this. You can be quote unquote salesy in that area. What you don't want to do is do that every day. You want to have the mix, you want to have the content, I would actually do that like 1 to 10, 1 to 5. You need to be giving way, way, way more than you're asking. Way more. The other side of that is bringing the classic, giving something of value, checklist, a template, a cheat sheet, a guide, or whatever. Bring people in, get them on an email list. And then again, valuable content, but then you can also send dedicated sales emails. Hey, this week we're doing blah, 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 blah. Come in here and check it out. It's always like using content as a lead into the next step and understanding what that is.
Yeah. Interesting. So like, this is what I think about, and let me know if I'm on the right track or not. When I think about buying journeys, I was first put onto this by, so quick side note, Justin, this is me overthinking content. And so, but just give me your thoughts on it. So I'll try to briefly explain it. So like, I came across John Dewey's 5 Stages of Consumers Buying Behavior. And it starts off with problem recognition. So if a consumer starts off with, okay, I have a problem, then they go on searching for the solution, then they compare different solutions, and then they actually make a purchase. And then it's like a post-purchase evaluation of like, was that a good purchase? Like, did I go through that correctly? And so like, in my mind, I was like, if that's the process that consumers go through when it comes to making buying decisions and solving their problems, then my goal with content on social media is to address each one of those stages. And so like my goal is now, yes. So in order for them to get to the next stage, they need some sort of information because they're in a learning stage until they get to the purchasing stage. And so like, I want to say like the action stage of making a purchase. And so in that learning stage, I want to fulfill each one of those, whatever they're looking for in my niche, whatever it is. I'm like, all right, cool. I want to be able to have content that explains their problems better than they do. And then I want to have content that also gives them all the solutions that come along with my niche. So not just me and my company, what we solve, but it's like, hey, this company does this. I wouldn't actually say it like that, but it's like, hey, these are the different solutions. For example, if I was thinking of selling my home, I'd be like, for somebody who is, for a family that is like, hey, we just added another baby into the family and we're looking to upgrade. For that family who had land on their lot, I'm like, wait a second, you want a bigger house, right? Yes. Well, yes, the solution is selling this home and then buying a bigger one. But have you thought of adding on to your current house? Like that's another solution that doesn't involve me, but it's maybe a better solution to what you're trying to, the problem that you have. And so giving them all the options and then obviously the comparative analysis of like, okay, now you chose this solution that has to do with selling the home. Here's the difference between me, my competitor B, and my competitor C. I offer this, they don't. I offer this, or they offer something, I don't. And so this is why you're a perfect match for us. And basically, I'm using the content to fulfill each one of those stages in their buying journey. Like that's how ultimately, like that's how I think about when it comes to, I want to say the overall strategy with content. Like that's what I think about. And so,
yeah, and I would think about what channels you're going to use to deliver on that.
yes, exactly.
I think that's the key is understanding like you can use different channels for different things and you might have to, right? Like somebody coming on LinkedIn or any social feed probably doesn't actually care about the comparison between you and this and the other. They're not there yet.
100%.
And so like understanding like you might need that piece of content. So prior to a sales call or with a sales outreach or with something further down the funnel, you've got it.
Mm-hmm.
Or in a classic case, somebody typing it in, it might not work in that scenario, but like typing in an X versus V, in a software scenario, that's huge. It's this software versus this software, right? And you create a blog post and all that type of thing. But knowing the channel, right? And knowing what people's intentions are for that channel and what they're looking to do and how you can, that way you can do more, get more done without having to create a billion different things.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely the platform and like where you're actually distributing that to fulfill that stage in the buying journey definitely plays a role in that. Justin, one, I appreciate you. Appreciate your brain, appreciate your knowledge. And anybody who watches this, I'm pretty sure appreciate you. If somebody had more questions, either about working with you or your newsletter, like where could we send them?
Everything can be found at justinsimon.co. If you're interested in listening to the podcast, if you're like, I'm into distribution now, I want to be able to learn how to get more, you can check the podcast out in any feed. Just type in distribution first. It's going to be there. And then, yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn if you want to. I talk about this stuff every single day. Yeah.
Nice. Perfect, dude.
All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Distribution First, and thank you for listening all the way through. I appreciate you so much. And I hope you're able to apply what you learned in this episode, one way or another, into your content strategy as well. Speaking of strategy, we have a lot of things going on this year that are going to help you build your brand, 10x your content, and transform the way you do content marketing. Make sure to subscribe to the show and sign up for my newsletter at justinsimon.co so you don't miss a thing. I look forward to serving you in the next episode as well. And until then, take care, and I'll see you next time.